Are you playing mind games with yourself before you can even put anything down on the paper? Are you holding yourself back with your fear of the blank page? If so, then this is the video for you. Coming up. What's up, everybody? Youngman Brown here, and this is Your Creative Push, the podcast and YouTube channel that pushes you to pursue your creative passions. And you earlier just saw me as a bird. This is a drawing by Dan Barry, and he'll draw you as a bird as well for $5 or £5. I don't know what the equivalency is, but for very cheaply, you can get a version of yourself as a bird by a professional cartoonist and illustrator. And Dan was my guest actually this week on the podcast. And amongst the many different things that we talked about that were super inspirational, one of the things we discussed was the fear of the blank page, or as Dan calls it, page fright, and how to get past it. And this is a symptom that doesn't just affect people that are just starting out in their creative journeys. This is something that pops up for creative people that are well into their professional careers. This idea of sitting down and getting to work and not knowing exactly what you're going to write about, or if you do have an idea, not knowing what kind of form that's going to take, or imagining all the problems that are going to occur when you do sit down to that blank page with all the potentiality that your ideas have. And I think Dan has a great mindset when it comes to this. And I want to play you a clip from this week's episode, actually. Here it is.
You know, I think the saying, what's the saying? Experience is what you get when you don't get what you want. Like, I think that's true. And I don't often get what I want when I'm drawing or when I'm thinking or editing or writing or whatever. But once you've got something that exists, you've got something that's editable. And then you can work on improving something that exists. It's really, really hard to improve something that doesn't. You know, if it stays in your head, it's formless. It's a vapor that you can't grab hold of. So by doing that first version, the crappy version, you've turned it into something solid, and you can start chipping away at it. You can change the shape of it because it's solidified at that point. I think that's really, really important. You know, I working with students for so long, you'd see people who would sit at the desk and just sort of, you could see them almost straining, like trying to force out an idea. Like, if I just, an idea, well, it never comes out that way. You know, you can't just sort of force an idea, and you've got to get like the first 19 crappy versions down, and then you've got to start, you know, smushing them together and getting them to interrelate and, you know, bounce off each other and have babies, and then you take their babies and smush them into different babies. And this is how ideas work. They're an ecosystem, and you've got to start mating them together and see what happens. And this all sounds really grubby now, but there's something quite delightful about working with ideas on a page that is you know, you get that dopamine hit, you get the sort of deep excitement about it when you start mating these ideas together and seeing what weird babies they've got. It's really exciting.
So the major takeaway from that clip is what Dan said about once it exists, then it's editable. I think so often we freak ourselves out when we get these ideas in our head, an idea to start to fill that blank page, but before we put pen to paper, we are editing it in our heads. And that's when we start to freak ourselves out. That's when we ask all these what if questions that can't even be answered in our heads. It's that act of putting it on the paper and filling up the page or the computer screen or whatever your tools are. That's when you get to figure out exactly what the idea is and give it shape. A lot of this comes down to trust. And Stephen King talks about trusting the people in the basement. And for lack of a better term, that's like your subconscious. It's trusting yourself in the actual act of creation and trusting yourself in that process to find the answers to those unknown questions about what is exactly going to be created from this seed of an idea that you have in your head. But when we think about things too much in our head, we really freak ourselves out. And a lot of times that freaking out, it causes us to not even do the thing at all, to not even start. So it's really important to just kind of get to it. It's never going to end up being the way that you envisioned it anyway, even if you could envision it to its completion in your head before you put it down. So you got to trust yourself. You got to trust that you are going to be able to get through that creation process and answer those questions that you don't have the answers to yet, or even answer the questions that you don't have the questions for yet. You have to trust yourself in that process. And if you don't trust yourself, that might be because you haven't given yourself enough opportunities to see something through to completion. So it really is as easy as just sitting down and starting. As scary and awkward and massive as that undertaking may seem, you have to sit down and start, and then surprise yourself and congratulate yourself when you do get to completion and you do find those awesome gems that come from somewhere else. Like, you have no idea where that answer came from. That's one of the best parts about the creative process, is diving into it and seeing what comes out. Some of it might just completely knock your socks off. So you got to get yourself in the position to have that happy surprise happen. So if this was helpful to you, please consider hitting subscribe, hit that notify bell so that you can get future videos, and hit that thumbs up for me so that other people that have fear of the blank page can also find this video. It helps greatly as I'm growing this channel and creating videos, and it also helps me to know what kind of videos you're looking for in the future as I create more content. Also, if you need more help with Fear of the Blank Page, I've listed 3 episodes where my guests and I talked about that amongst many other subjects listed below. And I highly recommend listening to Dan's episode as well, because we talked about a ton of different great stuff. Also, just for fun, there's a cat in a spaceship that Dan drew while we were talking, and he sent it to me. And there's my wife as a bird. Isn't she beautiful? If you want Dan to draw you as a bird, there's the link, and I'll also link that below. And until next time, as always, remember that the universe needs and deserves your creativity and your creations, and you are the universe.